Hello and welcome to episode 172 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, the decision of whether to drive our electric car or our gas-guzzling SUV on a 2,000-mile odyssey is tearing my family apart. There hasn't been this much domestic conflict at our home since we argued over whether to watch the Super Bowl or Lego Batman.
Scientists are proposing that extreme heat waves be named similar to how we name extreme storms. I propose we name them like corporate sponsorships. Something like, this deadly heat wave and your impending heat stroke are brought to you by ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil, we're trying to kill you.
They really are. They don't care. Former Nissan head Carlos Ghosn, who boldly brought the first mass-produced EV to market, the Nissan Leaf, stole millions from his company and escaped to his native Lebanon in a box, is speaking out again and giving tips on flying cross-oceanic in a box. Turns out they really restrict carry-on in situations where you are the carry-on.
Europe has passed two major new laws set to accelerate electric vehicle adoption. Chargers with at least 400 kilowatt output must now be placed at least every 60 kilometers by 2026. Also included, a port, so James can plug in his defibrillator.
Also this week's show, a new natural gas leak study. Paris is the latest city now charging more for parking permits based on vehicle size. And landlords in BC are forbidding air conditioners. Why? I guess they want their clients to turn over quickly, so to speak. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
Okay, I have an answer for you. I think you asked last time whether or not my electric kettle can boil water as fast as my new Induction cooktop.
Okay, I think I know the numbers on this from the studies. And the answer should be... Oh, I don't know which to pick. I don't want to be wrong, Brian.
It just depends on how many watts can get into your cooktop, I guess. But for people new to the show, I have this fancy electric kettle that's 3,000 watts that I had to import from the UK because 3,000 watt kettles are a common thing over there. We're limited usually to 1,500 watts. So I've got this 3,000 watt electric kettle. I've got a special 240 volt plug in my kitchen so I can run it. Boils water really fast. I've got this new Induction cooktop. And it turns out if I use a large saucepan with a large surface area, then the Induction cooktop boils faster. If I use kind of a normal size saucepan, then the electric kettle boils faster.
Well, okay, but you wouldn't be doing that anyway to make tea. You would be making...
No, it's more convenient to just use the electric kettle to make tea. So we don't boil water a lot.
Are you a pasta family? Do you boil pasta?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, you know, with the old gas cooktop, we would pre-boil the water in the electric kettle because that's so much faster. The worst thing about the gas cooktop, it takes forever to boil water. Even when you've got the maximum boil on, it's terrible. So, yeah, Induction, way better. Get
your boil on and get Induction. Well, that's good. That's good. So you really notice it, eh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely great. And on that topic, there is a new story here from the New York Times. So when we got our gas cooktop taken out, they capped the line that went into the kitchen there, but it still smelled like it was completely sealed off. It was completely capped. And still, there was a little bit of a leak, a little bit of a smell of natural gas. And as we know from previous stories on the show, this is a new study. Leaks can make natural gas as bad for the climate as coal, says a new study. And so the ideal here, again, New York Times, natural gas, long seen as a cleaner alternative to coal and an important tool to fight and slow global warming, can be just as harmful to the climate. A new study has concluded unless companies can all but eliminate the leaks that plague its use. It takes as little as 0.2% of gas to leak to make natural gas as big a driver of climate change as coal, the study found. And like I say, this line, it was completely sealed. It was completely capped. It didn't look like it should leak, and it totally did. And this is what's happening with all of our natural gas infrastructure, apparently.
Gas is smaller than water, I'm guessing. I mean...
Yeah, the molecules or whatever it is that needs to leak out, yeah.
So if you have a water balloon, you can leave it sitting around for a while. But if
Right.
you have an air balloon, the air goes out.
That's who are you, Mr. Scientist? now?
I
That's
am. I'm going to
amazing.
start a new YouTube channel and make millions of dollars and buy all kinds of EVs, one of every one, every kind.
Yeah. So this is a peer-reviewed study. It's from Brown University and the Rocky Mountain Institute. It had lots of researchers from Harvard and Duke and NASA, and it's going to be published next week in the journal Environmental Research Letters. And, the Inflation Reduction Act that Biden brought in, lots of good, clean energy stuff, but it does also include some, credits for natural gas as well, unfortunately. But, the thing that I didn't quite understand, and I still don't quite understand this, but when natural gas leaks and goes straight into the atmosphere, it's kind of more potent, but also apparently it does dissolve eventually after a few years. Like, whereas the rest, if you burn coal, that greenhouse gas kind of stays for a long time. But for whatever reason, it does dissipate. But in the short term, it's way worse.
I see. Well, I don't know. How long is it going to take us to get off natural gas? We're just getting started.
No, and of course, I'm trying to do it here in my house in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada, where it's frigid cold, and I am, at least 10 years ahead of the curve, I think, for what everybody else is going to do.
Just to set the scene, it's not frigidly cold right now. It's a balmy, moderate summer day with a little
very
bit,
nice.
little bit of smoke in the sky.
A little bit of smoke. The mornings have been surprisingly cold for July. That's
They
the only thing
have, haven't they?
Yeah.
Tell that to the
concerned
guy
me
who
that-
heats his pool with solar panels, because that really kills, it's a buzzkill for your pool when it goes down to 8 degrees at night in Celsius.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I have a couple of car updates too, and I know I told you I do have a new car on the way. I've ordered a new electric car, but I'm going to leave that as a cliffhanger and talk
We should
about
have
it
a
next week.
poll. We should have
No,
a
that's-
Twitter poll.
No,
Oh, come on.
I don't want to do a poll.
Well, send in your comments now if you have some guesses, people. Cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Okay,
No, we don't need a
do
poll.
it to piss off Brian.
But I have a new car, may arrive by next show, but we'll talk about it next show. But
Is it a
anyway,
Porsche?
so I just
yes
got...
or no? Is it a Porsche?
No, it is not a Porsche.
You look good in a Porsche. I really think
Yeah,
you
it's
look
true.
good. Yeah, it's true. So would I,
but-
somewhat.
Yeah. Meanwhile, another sort of car update. So we just got back from the lake, and we were driving out to the lake a couple of days ago, and this is a single lane highway where you're meeting traffic coming the other way. And what often happens in a situation like that is the car coming towards you or truck throws up a giant rock
Right.
and throws it at your windscreen.
Yeah.
And yeah, worst rock I've ever gotten on a windscreen. It lower corner, driver's side, right in the corner there. And it's one of those star patterns.
I had one of those with our first Prius.
Is that right?
It was the first brand new car, so it was devastating. So family's first brand new car, and we were just taking a trip to Alberta for summer vacation. It was just a couple of months after we got it, and it was a Sunday. And we stopped in Moose Jaw. It didn't take long. Stopped in Moose Jaw, but I had that exact thing. I know how you feel.
Yeah. Super loud, super jarring. I was stumbling on the word windscreen. I think maybe that's the British say windscreen. We say windshield.
Right.
And
or
maybe
Mr.
because
Burns
I
would
just-
say windscreen, but
Is that right? Yeah. But maybe because I just visited the UK, I'm trying
sure,
to say
I knew
windscreen.
things would stick. I knew a few things would stick.
Yeah.
How often have you had
So,
fish and chips since you got back?
0 times, and we didn't have any. I didn't have any in the UK,
Okay.
which was probably a mistake.
Oh.
But anyway, so the star pattern, and then 2 of the tines on the star were like a couple inches long, and I was like, "Oh, that's not good. I think those are going to spread." And yeah, sure enough. So now the one crack is about 2 feet long, and I will need a new windscreen. But I do have the package policy
Oh,
insurance.
that's good. Have you looked into how hard it'll be to get where we live? Because it's
No,
we're
I'm
talking
not
about the Tesla,
anticipating-
right?
Yeah, it's the Tesla windscreen. I'm not anticipating problems. I mean, there's 4 million Teslas on the road, so it's not the uncommon thing it once was.
Is this why you bought a new car? You went and this one's broken. I need another one.
Yeah, it's like yeah. didn't want to have to take it back to the detail geek and get it clean. So
Yeah.
But anyway, so I will have to.
That video made him millions of dollars detailing your car on YouTube right here where we live. I was thinking of taking my Leaf to him. I was cleaning my Leaf last night. I thought, oh man, maybe I should just leave it and take it to the detail geek.
No, that's not a bad idea.
It's pretty filthy.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a video, The Detail Geek, on YouTube, and I think more than 1 million people have looked at my car getting cleaned.
There you go. And it's really hard getting the Christmas tree needles because 2 years ago I got a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years before that and before that. So yeah, there's pine needles in my car. They stick to
those are
upholstery.
really hard to get out.
Well, that's exciting news. We look forward to next week. You're going to reveal it, right?
Yes.
It has to be next week because I think the week after I might be going on vacation. So
yeah, just want to leave a cliffhanger.
Well, tune in next week, kids, because it's going to be shocking. Shocking. It's not a Hummer EV, is it?
No.
That I will look good in. I find it slimming. That's the Hummer EV. Well, Brian, I don't have much in my personal life this week. I have vermin in my yard. I've got a gopher, which we call gophers here. The Richardson's ground squirrel. I don't know what you call it. It's not a groundhog. Yeah. There's people listening all over the world who probably don't know what I'm talking about. But it's not a mouse. It's not a rat. It's like a squirrel who lives in a hole in the ground. Yeah. And bats its tail when it wants to. And they have this high-pitched squeal.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. No, we had some trying to make a nest under our front steps, and I just ran the hose in there for a while, and they didn't stay. The
thing is, I don't know how they would get out of my yard. They'd have to dig a hole. Because I might have had, they might have come in the gate. Because the way my fence is, you'd have to dig a hole to get in. And I don't know what. All I know is that we don't have any strawberries anymore. We had a pretty bountiful harvest of strawberries. Now they're not there anymore. Wonder why. They could also be birds, but anyway, once they catch on, I'm going to put a net over that thing. You know what I did as a joke the other night during supper? I scanned a YouTube video for sounds that repel animals.
Oh yeah,
and I'm putting it on, and I've put it on, and I'm like turning up the volume, and it's like, I don't get it. It's not working. This is a joke. And my kid, my 15-year-old, is going, what are you doing? I didn't even announce that I was doing it, so I know it was legit.
Yeah.
And then, to make it even hilariouser, a couple minutes later, my son upstairs is saying, what is that? And he doesn't know what's going on. He's in his bedroom, and he can hear these frequencies that my partner and I in our 50s cannot. And so I said, hey, interesting. So I have Bluetooth speakers for the pool, which attach to the side of my pool, which I really like because they're in stereo. Okay. And I played it out in the yard for a while. My daughter wants me to keep the gopher, though.
Yeah.
I don't know why. They make more gophers. I don't think she understands. And there won't be any strawberries for her. Also, I am working on a driveway project as we speak, Brian. I'm putting a little post in my driveway to put a holster, because I have a four-car driveway. And so it's a long ways away from the house where we actually park our EVs, because we've got a camper on one side and a SUV used to pull the camper that sits unused most of the time next to the house. So we park behind those two things. And so I took a little 4x4 piece of wood and a little cement thing that you put those posts on to make a deck. Like it holds a 4x4 board and is kind of a little base for it. It's wobbly in there. It doesn't hold it tight. So I bought some construction adhesive and on a caulking gun and just put that all around in generous quantities and stuck the board in. And a couple hours later, it was good. So then I bought a $15 little piece of plastic that holds the charging gun that goes into the car. So my wife can just unplug the car and go 2 feet to the left and just plug it there. Right now, we're draping it over the mirror on the SUV, which is a few steps away and kind of not a very elegant solution. Plus, it's a better chance that water could get in there or something that could corrode the contacts. So that's what's new with me. But I've got a big story here that I want to start the show with, because hours of time I've been putting into this. And maybe if you have an EV, you've done this too. And I've watched videos and I've watched things to know, can I go on a vacation with my EV? Now, our main problem is we have a limited amount of time because our son has decided he wanted to come. He's always wanted to come to Vancouver and see the Coquihalla Highway, which is this big infrastructure project for a big highway through the mountains, which they blow a bunch of stuff up. And it's Colorado level highway, let's put it that way. And he's always wanted to see it, and it's been a lifelong interest in him. So he's decided he's going to come, and that changes everything, Brian. Everything changes because my son comes, because he works for the city. He's got a summer job, union job, and he can only get a few days off. So we're going to go on the August long weekend, which is the first weekend of August. And he's going to finagle a few days that week from earned time off and a day off. And the limits our time, so it makes it hard to go in an EV, especially my EV. I just wanted to, but we're on a budget too. You know, I planned this big trip to Vancouver Island, and then I costed it, and my wife got cold feet. So now she just doesn't want to go to Vancouver. She doesn't want to spend any money at all. But we're doing it anyway, because life is short, Janice. And we're gonna go. Yes, we've gone to your cottage the last 3 years, and that was lovely. But I mean, that's just kind of like a careful thing to do during a pandemic, and that was very nice to be able to do that. But now it's time to stretch our legs and leave the home base and discover new things.
Yeah, and all this stuff is harder when your time is limited, and you have this Chevy Bolt EV, great EV, but for highway trips, the charging is a bit slow. It's limited to 50 kilowatts, so you have to find the chargers and have the time to charge it.
Right. And, a lot of new cars today charge at least, some of the cheaper cars are still twice as fast as that, but a lot of them are several times fast as that. And that's the peak charging rate. It doesn't mean the whole charge is 5 times faster because the peak is 5 times faster, but it does mean that it happens faster. And you can calculate that on a better route planner.
Yeah, and it really helps a lot. Like when you get that peak charging rate, and in my car, it's 175 kilowatts. You get those huge numbers for just a few minutes, and it makes a huge difference in how fast your total charge time is.
Now, the reason is the cars control this so you don't hurt your battery, right? It's a battery management system, and they know what the battery can take, and they control it so that there's the right curve and the right temperature. I was watching some videos with a guy who, I think he's from Edmonton or Calgary, and he was doing cold weather tests with a Kona EV, and he says his battery needs to reach 27 degrees Celsius, which is almost 80 Fahrenheit, and then boom, the car will go to its maximum speed. And then you can do that by charging. Just the charging itself will heat it up, and it'll also run the battery heater. But, you said that charging is slower in winter. So that makes it almost impossible it's very, very inconvenient for me. So we wouldn't even probably dare that. But we do have the SUV, and the SUV is an SUV. It's big. Yeah. The big problem with the Bolt for me is the size. It's very small, and it's very kind of hard to, I was in the back seat for a while, and I hurt my back during our last little day trip. So I don't know how that would work with everybody, and we can't pack a damn thing. My wife and my son went mountain biking, 20 minutes away, and she packed half the house to go for a couple of hours. So I don't see how she can. She claims she can, but I don't see how she can. So because money is a huge issue, it's another reason, because I costed it out for the SUV with the EPA online, and they said it was like $1,100 for premium gas. Wow. To go there and back. That's just there and back, not the driving once we get there or any touristy things. And then I've got to get an oil change for it, which is $100, and $100 for the insurance for a month. So that's $1,300. Now, it's probably less than that. It's probably I'm doing other calculations, and it might be less than that. It might be $300-$400 less than that, but it's still many hundreds of dollars. How much in the Bolt EV? $200 there and back for charging, which is interesting to me because I've had this impression, Brian, that everybody's been telling me Tesla prices are so high on the highway now that it's not worth having a Tesla. I've heard that from actual people, not you, but people, dumb people. And even the person who sold me the car, the dealership said, I think I signed a form saying you realize that highway trips will cost more than a gas car possibly, or the same. And I said, they had this, I think they had an EV disclaimer form just so people wouldn't complain. Right. But that's not the case at all. I mean, I could probably do that trip maybe $250, $300 in my Prius.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point for me is not emissions. It's not well, it is kind of emissions because do you remember the day, were you around a couple days ago when we had to board up the windows because it was air quality beyond 10? It was really bad here again, or were you gone somewhere?
Yeah, no, I was around for that, and I just stayed in and had the air conditioning.
Yeah, but I don't want to have to do that. I like fresh air. Summer is short here, and I'm getting robbed, so I'm pissed off as hell that I would have to give $1,000 to a goddamn oil company. It's not what I want to do right now. And
yes, and I'll just interject. We're in Canada. The gas prices are a lot higher here than they are in the United States. Not as high as Europe, but pretty high. Although, like, you would get the cheapest gas in Alberta on the way there.
Right.
But then by the time you hit BC, the prices go way up again. BC has very high gas prices.
Yeah, it's like $2.20 a liter, and times that by 3.7, you'll get roughly what a gallon is or something like that. Yeah, it's $6.75 a gallon. I think I figured it out because I had to use the EPA calculator. So that's a lot. And that's not what it was. It's a lot lower than what it was a couple of years ago, right? It was really bad then when the pandemic was over and people started doing a lot more economic activity and driving. I could buy 3 hotel rooms for what I would save in the Bolt EV and, take my time. But I can't because my damn son. And my son, I hate to say it, is impatient as hell. He's the most impatient person in the world. I blame electronics, but my daughter is more glued to her screen than he is, and she's fairly patient, so I don't know. But he's incredibly impatient, and especially when it comes to driving, and he's really trying to talk me into taking the SUV, and I'm a little bit worried because the SUV is a 2003 vehicle, and, will the brakes work down a mountain slope?
Yeah.
And he says, you could just use the runoff lanes, that they have for trucks.
Yeah.
He wasn't joking. He was trying to manipulate me into taking the SUV for his own damn business. And he says, I'll pay for gas, some of the gas, but he won't. So I would worry about range if I took the Bolt, and I would have to calculate things carefully, and I'd always be thinking, I'd always be checking, and maybe there'd be a lineup, and my son would get, crazy, and he made the point, though, that, if we got into Kamloops, this town that he really wants to see, at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock instead of 8 or 9 o'clock, that would make a difference. We would have more, that extra hour of time, and he makes a good point there. Yeah. It's the only good point he made, though. But, to be honest, I think I would enjoy myself not being squished in that tiny car. But why not be, if it was my partner and I can't wait to do this with my partner and I. I'm going to find a cabin in the woods somewhere in the mountains, and we're going to go back there without the damn kids. Because, wow, what a dream it would be to drive in the mountains. And I've read testimonials to this with my very car. The regenerative braking, you don't even use your brakes hardly. Yeah. And it's just gaining back your power, and it's smooth and quiet and just, So according to a Better Route Planner, from here to Vancouver, which is over 1,700 kilometers, over 1,100 miles, I would spend 5 hours and 47 minutes charging during that trip. And we would spread that over 3 days. So 2 fairly long days and, 2 long days and 1 half day or something like that. The Hyundai Kona EV, which only charges at 75 kilowatts, would charge in 4 hours and 41 minutes, so an hour quicker. Now, the problem with that is there's not always fast chargers in our corridor here. There's a lot of 50 kilowatt chargers, which I think should be outlawed. You don't have to worry about this as a Tesla owner because all Tesla charging stations are fast. They're all... Yeah. Well, then some of them are faster than others. The version 3s are faster than the version 2s, but not something really you have to worry about too much as a Tesla driver. But some of these stations are only available if they're, but there's also some free ones too. The Mustang Mach-E was also the same as the Kona, to my surprise, because it's a very expensive car. And by the way, I saw one at a small town lot on our way on our day trip a couple of weeks ago in southeast Saskatchewan. There's one sitting there on the lot. There's two on the lot on the dealership by my house down Broad Street. So they're not selling. And there's been stories on Ford not selling. Like, it's slowed down.
Yeah, I think the lower prices at Tesla are cutting into Ford's sales.
Yeah. It's not a great value, I don't think. It's a good car, but it's not. There's some drawbacks to it, and maybe they'll get those worked out, hopefully. The Tesla Model 3 on the Model 3 network, I think I chose your vintage of car, like 2019, 2020. 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, and like you said, your own experience is that you do what you want to do before the charging is finished in the summertime.
Yeah, typically, yeah.
And I noticed, though, that all your trips, it planned out like 11 minutes here, 8 minutes there, 18 minutes there. They were all fairly frequent and short, even though I didn't have it on that setting. Do you know why that is? Is it the way the car charges faster? And the lower?
Yeah, it's just a preference, and it could depend on what you set. Like
I set it in the middle one for length of stops, or frequent stops or long stops. I set it in the middle, the default position.
Yeah, and there's also like what percentage are you willing to go down to when you arrive at your destination?
Yes, which is a good
10%.
question. We should ask EV owners. I would love to ask that question.
Yeah. But an important thing, if you do take 3 days to do the drive, is finding hotels that have chargers, because that's the greatest thing.
Now, Brian, I'm having trouble finding hotels, period. And I started this over a week ago. And, they're all sold out. And also, as my dental hygienist told me last week, just before the podcast, hotels are a lot more expensive now after the pandemic. Has you found that?
True,
Why is that?
The rates are up. I'm not sure why.
Maybe because everyone's traveling more, because we're making up for it, or...
People are back at it, I guess. But yeah, the rates are definitely up.
So I didn't. That was a sticker shock when I said, "Hey, let's go to Vancouver." I didn't know that the ferry was over $300 two ways, and I didn't know that, and that's sold out. 3 weeks in advance, it's sold out, unless you go at midnight.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. That's the ferry from Vancouver to Victoria or Nanaimo on Vancouver Island, a very large island just off of Vancouver on the ocean. So for the traditional Regina to Calgary one-day trip, which I made 1,000 times, because we have relatives there, and because, where do we live? We don't live anywhere. That's the closest attraction to us, I think. We usually stop 40 minutes for lunch and 40 minutes for supper in Swift Current and Medicine Hat, as I said before. And so this will be only adding 15 minutes to those two stops, and then a 20-minute stop on top of that somewhere west of Calgary, half hour out of town. That's not terrible. I mean, we could do that. That's nothing. I wouldn't even, whine about having the car that I have, because, that's perfectly doable. It's not, if it was just me and my partner and we had the time, it wouldn't be an issue. But because I've got a son with ants in his pants, an antsy son, the traditional 40 minutes each, and it would be adding 15 minutes. So that's nothing. And regardless, Brian, I booked hotels. I don't know how I'm going to go yet, but I booked hotels in Calgary, just north of Calgary in Airdrie, where we have my niece who wants to get together with us. So we booked a hotel there. It has a charger. I think it's a Quality Inn. And
Great.
But, because that's great when you could start your day with a full charge.
Amazing. Yeah.
Then, but I also thought, well, hey, maybe if I had a hotel that's near a charger, I could go, I could dump the family at the hotel, go half a block away to the charger, put the car there for an hour and a half or an hour and 15 minutes, whatever it takes to go from zero to whatever, and then pick it up after supper or when we go for supper or something like that, So that's an interesting option. By the way, I thought it was really cheap to fly there, so I was looking at that. It was only $1,300 or something for all four of us to go there and back, which was...
Yep. Not bad.
I mean, that's the exact price of what the SUV might cost just to go there
Yeah.
and back. But then I would have to rent a car, and those are hard to come by already for that period.
Yeah.
So that was tricky. And I was looking, of course, for electric cars. And to my surprise, the Teslas were the cheap ones.
Wow.
Let me just bring this up here because I have some notes here on my vacation. And yeah, it was really cheap to buy the Tesla compared to anything else.
Yeah,
It's
so
actually
Hertz in Canada, they rent Teslas. I know they rent some Polestars.
Yeah, Polestars and Teslas, and those, maybe they're not popular and people aren't picking them. But out there, why wouldn't you? Because the charging infrastructure is crazy good. It's like
Yeah.
California. So I don't know why you wouldn't.
No, and Teslas are super common in Vancouver, so everyone would be familiar with them, I think.
Yeah. So I did find, by the way, I found a hotel in Airdrie and Kamloops. And then we're going to stay in Surrey because there's not very many hotel rooms in Vancouver that are affordable.
Yeah.
And it's only like, we did that in Los Angeles too. We drove 45 minutes, which is nothing because you're looking at new things when you drive. So it's not like a tedious thing.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I wonder how close that hotel, because I jumped on it because it wasn't there before and it was a bargain. Somebody must have canceled. So I jumped on it and just booked it. And I said, I wonder how close it is to
The SkyTrain.
well, no, to a charger because it doesn't
okay.
have a charger. And
Because that's the other thing. You can take the SkyTrain into Vancouver.
there's one across the parking lot.
Ah,
There's like this kind of leisure center for the city there that the parking lot literally adjoins the hotel. So you walk, I don't know, 100 yards across the parking lot and there's two chargers that have a 2-hour limit on them. But, maybe I could get away overnight after the place closes at 9:30. But still, that was pretty good. And then I looked around and it was miles away before the next one. So it was just a total fluke that there was one right there. But anyway, yeah, I looked at Turo because Turo's an option in Calgary and Vancouver. That is do you know what that is? Can you describe it?
no, I don't know what that is.
It's like Airbnb for car rentals.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, and some people in the States would buy a Tesla when the Model 3s when they first came out,
Yeah.
and they make a killing because you couldn't get one, right? And everyone wanted to try one for a day. So they made a killing. They really did. But now it's here. So yeah, it's kind of weird. I've been looking into it and they didn't give me enough kilometers in a day to do the whole thing from Calgary. But one of them gave me 2,000, which was almost enough, I think. But so they'll drive it out and then you got to pay extra if you want to pick it up in certain places and they kind of want a full charge. But it's really, and I think the big problem is that they won't let my kid drive it. And my kid going is actually a big part of this trip because I have some health issues and I'm not going to be able to drive all day long and concentrate. My doctor doesn't want me to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and he won't be able to drive. So that's out anyway. But I looked into it and it was interesting. And one day, if we do fly somewhere or want to ditch the SUV, and it's certainly an option. There's lots of options with Turo. And I found actually 3 car companies. I can't remember what they were, but there was some of them, and it was $940 for 5 days for an Escape Hybrid or similar. And the Prius was even more for some reason. But for some reason, the Tesla Model 3, I think even a Y competed with some of those prices. Which is a bigger vehicle. So yeah, that was interesting. And I thought that, wow, that'd be awesome because I looked at all the charging spots where we're going and there's lots of them. There's no range anxiety, It's like we'll drive, we'll get low, we'll find something within 40 kilometers or something.
Yeah.
But that's where I'm at. We're probably going to take the SUV. It's killing me, Brian. It's killing me to do so. It's killing me to give all that money to the damn people. It's also worrisome that my brakes are going to fail on the mountain and I will have to use the runoff. We'll see how much my son likes the runoff when he shits his pants, because that's going to be no fun whatsoever. Plus, they'll have to tow our sorry butts out of there and spend thousands on new brakes, but we'll see. Anyway, I just want to say that I really love the idea of vacationing in an EV, and I think everyone who's listening to the show is going to love it. I mean, you could, I don't know where you're living, but it's probably easier for most people who's listening to the show to rent an EV and take it on vacation. Maybe you don't even have a car. Maybe you've got big gas guzzlers that you don't want to take on a long trip, that you would rather have an EV for. Well, there are options out there. And 3 rental companies, Hertz, another one that starts with an A, and a third one that was local, all had EVs available. Like if you do that kayak search, it searches all the different companies. Right. They were all coming up with those. So very interesting stuff, and I can't wait to do it. And my biggest fantasy, of course, is down the road to do an RV vacation in an EV where your RV is your EV and you just stop, and it's got to have a shower, though, with hot water.
Yeah.
And a toilet, because I'm getting fussy in my old age. I've never been a camper, but that's my situation.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of EV road trips, and hope to do more.
Right.
Okay, so moving on, we've got a story here from Paris. This is from The Guardian. We talked recently about the city of Montreal in Canada that was imposing larger parking fees, street parking fees, for large cars, and it turns out they're doing the same thing in Paris. And if you think about it, there's a huge disparity in the size of cars. Like, think of a Mini versus, a giant SUV. And if you're talking about street parking, you could literally park 2 Minis for every, giant SUV. So it makes sense to charge more. So Paris is the latest to do this. They haven't announced the complete details, but this is definitely going ahead, taking effect on January 1st. The quote here from The Guardian: the aim was to focus on an absurdity. Autobesity is what they call it. Autobesity.
What's your BMI?
The inexorable growth in vehicle size and weight. The number of SUVs in Paris has increased by 60% over the last 4 years and now make up 15% of the private vehicles in Paris. So
that's not good. It's kind of, I thought they were still doing well, but they're going the same route.
They're going the same route. So there's a quote here from the deputy mayor who's responsible for this. And he says, there are no dirt paths, no mountain roads. SUVs are absolutely useless in Paris. Worse, they're dangerous, cumbersome, and use too many resources to manufacture.
Yeah. But I like elbow room.
Yeah, people like them. People want them.
I like elbow room. I want to have a big fat cooler there. Some soft drinks in it, some water, a bag of peanuts. And not be putting things under the seat for every ounce of storage. But I would look forward to getting, say, the Chevy Equinox EV, which is smaller than the Equinox gas car, I think, at least in some respects. It's only a little bit bigger. I only need an inch or two, Brian. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. And I'll be fine.
Yeah.
A little bit of cargo room and a little bit of leg room in the back and a little bit of elbow room in the front, and we're good to go. I'm not asking for much. And I would love to have that, but it's going to be a couple of years or more before we get that stuff. But it's time for our regular segment. What do you think?
What do you think?
Time for What Do You Think, where I ask Brian what he thinks. Because I don't know. Brian, Ford, EV demand. What the hell's going on? Stockpiling up, including Saskatchewan, as I've said, where we live. $17,000 is taken off the base Lightning, making it $50,000 USD. I don't know why the base Lightnings are not selling. Why are they even making them? Because the fleet should be ordering them for years. I don't understand.
Yeah. I mean, the price has been high. We had all of this inflation over the last couple of years. So, everybody kind of raised their prices. And of course, initial demand was quite high for these. People want electric vehicles, and the car makers so far are not making enough of them. So they could crank up the price for them at the very beginning of this and sell them. But now that it's more of a normal thing, I think this is really just a return to what the price probably should have been to begin with. They just were able to increase the price because, there was such demand. When Tesla has huge demand, they crank up the prices. And then when demand drops, they lower the prices. So I don't think it's a particularly big deal as long as they do start selling again now with these new lower prices.
I hope they do. I really hope they do. The first Cybertruck apparently has rolled off the line. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. It is. It sounds like it's the very beginning of production for the Cybertruck. So they're not going to make a huge number of them this year, but it sounds like, production has begun. There'll be a few thousand out this year and then, a bigger amount next year.
Well, we'll be getting the reviews. We'll be getting the impressions of what they look like in person, and we'll see if it was a crazy idea or not. I'm leaning towards disaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I am. And I think I've had an order on one for a couple of years.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a massive, massive success.
Well, you should order one then. There's a guy in our local Facebook group who keeps buying new EVs constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't even realize, everybody's laughing at him, and he's like, his name is Nick. Nick, if you're listening, or friends of Nick, and I am sure there's a few. He does that, and it's just kind of hilarious. We should interview him because he's owned every vehicle there is, I think.
Wow.
Almost, beyond of the non-luxury brands anyway. So Carlos Ghosn interview with Forbes. He did an interview with Forbes magazine, and the escaped convict and one of the originators of the electric car revolution, Carlos Ghosn, former head at Nissan Renault, came out of hiding and did an interview for the first time in a long time. I guess he's doing a couple of interviews now. Can you remind us what his escape was like? Because it was ridiculous.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. But there's a Netflix documentary that I did watch about this. And, Carlos Ghosn was accused of taking money from Nissan. And he thought that the charges were unfair. And they have a very high conviction rate in Japan. I thought that was one of the interesting things from the documentary. Like, once you get charged with something, there's something like a 99% chance that you're going to be found
It's like being convicted, really.
Guilty, yeah. As soon as you're charged, it's like... So he snuck out of the country in it was like a giant case of some kind, like a musician's case or something, and managed to, sneak through security there at an airport and flew out of the country, out of Japan.
Yeah. So, and he's back to Lebanon, where his home country was. So he started the Leaf. The first model year was 2011, and he planned to sell millions and millions of them. That did not happen. It's a funny-looking car. If they made it less aerodynamic and more Bolt EUV, little, like a very small fake crossover. Yeah. I think they would have sold a lot more of them, even though it would have had worse mileage overall and worse highway mileage.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make that much of a difference in the city.
People did not like the styling, but it seemed to be part of that thing of, well, it's an electric car. We have to make it look different, which is not really necessary. Well, just make it look like a car.
Their excuse was that there was too much wind noise on the side view mirrors, rather. And because it's an EV, you really hear them, so they had to shape the front end, the front end, the headlights that way. But I tell you that my Leaf, I would take that on vacation if it had that range, because there would be plenty of room for us.
It's bigger than the Bolt?
It's much bigger than the Bolt. In car terms, like a millimeter is a lot, but it is bigger, and it's almost the size of the Prius, which, by the way, the Prius Prime, $45,000 in Canadian.
Wow.
$45,000. $10,000 more than it was. I don't know why anyone would buy that, Brian. Buy a Tesla, for God's sake.
Yep. Fully electric cars are here.
Okay, so he was asked about the current state of electric cars, and I have a clip.
You were one of the early movers with the Nissan Leaf. I would just love to get your perspective on that right now, even, if you were in charge or what you learned from that experience.
In 2009, I announced that we would be launching the first mass-marketed electric car in the world, that we did it with the Leaf, followed by Zoe for Renault. The only other person who really believed in it was Elon Musk with Tesla. That we were the only two guys fighting all the fashion of the hybrids and the very efficient internal combustion engine. Now everybody moving to electric car, and I think it's irreversible. The smartest people recognize the fact that they were wrong by disdaining the electric vehicle technology. Like, Volkswagen, I remember the CEO of Volkswagen at that time said that this is ridiculous, this will never fly. And when I see that Volkswagen massively investing in electric car, that means they have made their mea culpa. They said, no, we were wrong, we're going to turn it around. So the industry is changing, new technology are appearing, new suppliers are coming.
Then he commented on how Chinese automakers have the advantage due to all the reluctance and the incumbent automakers they've had over EVs.
Even new car makers are coming. I can tell you that one of the reasons for which the Chinese car industry is growing so fast is because they recognize from the beginning that it would be difficult for them to compete on internal combustion engine because they have so much, in a certain way, they are so much behind the rest of the industry. Yeah. But on electric car, because of the laziness of the global car maker to move to electric car, they're starting on par. And starting on par, it's a very good opportunity to be able to compete. And today, the Chinese are between the largest maker of electric cars. So what we are seeing today is that there was a decision to be made as early as possible, 2008, 2009. Some people, I think, unfortunately, Renault, Nissan, have taken a lot of delay to this because, again, the same thing I'm hearing from a lot of people inside Renault and Nissan. They are indecisive. They don't take the right decision. They are afraid. They are closing down. They're afraid of growth.
Brian, I have a thought on this. This is my thought of how things are playing. It seems like there's unfortunate delays in the combustion vehicle companies. They're the established automakers going to EVs, that they're really not ready. They claim they're ready. They're spending millions on advertising saying they're an EV forward company. But the proof is in the pudding, and they're, General Motors just shut down production because they ran out of batteries. I think there's a period. I don't think they're going to get their crap together fully until the 2030. And I think this is an opportunity for the Chinese market to, I think it's not Tesla who's going to kick their ass. I think it's the Chinese makers are going to kick their ass. And this is everybody, including the Koreans, if you're not putting out enough EVs.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on Carlos's thoughts?
It's Tesla and the Chinese automakers. They're the ones that are sort of leading the pack right now. But I would mention that there was a story about Mitsubishi this week. Mitsubishi and other the Japanese car makers has now officially pulled out of China because their sales have been plummeting over the last couple of years. And it's because, like the other Japanese automakers, they're lagging on EVs. And it's weird that they don't see that, because it's been very clear for many years that if you want to be in the Chinese market, you've got to sell EVs. The Chinese government has been telling everybody that for years now. So you would think that just given the size of the Chinese market, just that alone would be enough to convince the Japanese automakers to get on board.
All right, let's move on.
Okay, so heat waves, terrible heat waves happening in Europe right now. And is this an El Nino or a La Nina year?
El Nino.
It's El Nino, and El Nino is the one happens every 4 years or so, and it tends to be hot, right?
Yeah, well, it's the hot one, and the other one is Nina is the cold one. At least for where we live. I don't know how it affects where our listeners live, but I know where in Canada that's usually how they. And also it affects the moisture and the. Usually it's like a warmer, wetter winter or something like that. It doesn't affect the summer. But they say that this is contributing, the fact that these heat waves are happening are made worse by the fact that it's coincidentally that current is in the ocean now.
Yeah, and I was in Europe in the summer of 1994, and at the time it was the hottest summer ever in Europe. But now this is happening probably every 4 years, or every year at this point. But the new twist now is they want to start naming these extreme heat events, and I think this is probably a good idea. It's much the same as naming hurricanes and tropical storms. It's a good way to talk about them, I guess. And so Chiron is one of them. There's sort of two going now in Europe. Chiron and Cerberus are the two heat waves currently being named and are occurring.
How do you feel about that? Because it seems obscene. You're naming heat waves, like to make it palatable to your media audience.
It's not about making it palatable. It's about making it. It's about communication. I'm all about communication. This is why we do a podcast, James. We're communicators.
Sure we are.
And
but
so
we're not naming storms here, though. And we got a thunderstorm last night. What am I going to call that one? Edna?
Oh, I called it Shirley.
Shirley, Edna, whatever. Yeah. Okay.
But in any case, these are nasty, nasty temperatures in Italy. Of course, many, many people died. I think it was just last year. So this is happening now. Every year, but as an El Nino year, I don't know. This is very, very unsettling. Temperatures were up to 47 Celsius in Italy this past week, and it's not good.
The amount of people who have air conditioners in Europe, I think, is around 10%.
Yeah,
it's not even like here where we actually have air conditioners in Canada, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the population lives close to the U.S. border, and summers tend to be air conditioner worthy.
Yeah, and we're spoiled North Americans here.
Sure.
We're used to having every convenience. Canada, I will point out, the largest carbon emissions per capita, I believe, is Canada.
We're number one.
Yeah, we're number one. We've always used way more energy than anybody else. So, yeah, it's freezing cold here, but a lot of us have air conditioning because it's hot in the summer.
Well, from the New York Times, less than 2 weeks after the Earth recorded what scientists said were likely its hottest days in modern history, punishing heat waves are gripping much of the Northern Hemisphere, not just the places we mentioned. The record-breaking temperatures are being driven by emissions of heat-trapping gases, mainly caused by the burning of fossil fuels, of course, and by the timing, the return of El Nino, a cyclical weather pattern. I don't think that's fair to call it a weather pattern. It's better to call it it's a current, which causes weather patterns. Yeah. The Spanish-controlled La Palma Island, one of the Canary Islands, is on fire. And guess what? I actually have a sort of a connection to that. My son's, one of his best friends, is actually from there. A kid his age was born and grew up there for a little while before coming here. So his family is from there. And one of my, in Asia, Tuesday was the 27th day this year that Beijing has recorded temperatures above 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 Celsius, a record. 27th day this year. When you look at climate change statistics, they always say there'll be this many days over this temperature now and this many in 10 years and 20 years, and that number increases, and it becomes really brutal, really hard on people when thousands actually die. And they don't die right in front of you. They die after the fact when you tally them up. So the United States, Phoenix is expected to break a 49-year-old record on Tuesday with the city's 19th consecutive day of temperatures above 110 Fahrenheit or 43.3 Celsius. Elsewhere around the country, hot and humid conditions were expected to worsen along the Gulf Coast and throughout the Southwest, according to the National Weather Service. Again, this is from the New York Times. The planet has warmed about 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the 19th century. And all hell's breaking loose, Brian. We've gone from dreading winter to it's really too hot. It's dangerously, dangerously hot. And
yeah, I mean, this is a good news podcast. We try to focus on good news. The world is transitioning off fossil fuels. The world is transitioning to clean energy sources because they are better and cheaper, but the climate, unfortunately, has already changed.
Brian, I just wanted to quickly update a story about the province of British Columbia and Canada giving away air conditioners to those at risk. Apparently, there's been pushback on the west coast of Canada. The government of the Canadian West Coast province of British Columbia is offering free air conditioners to the vulnerable due to increasing heat waves. Giving out thousands of them over a 3-year period, I think. The landlords are not liking the idea. They are going to provide 8,000 units to medically vulnerable low-income households over the next 3 years in a related program. Their hydro company is offering residential customers $50 off the purchase of a qualifying air conditioner until the end of this month. And at least 50% of the free air conditioner units were expected to be installed in apartments or multi-dwelling units, which you would expect. And tenants and tenant advocates are speaking out now, saying that their landlords have discouraged them from using air conditioner units. One guy got a letter after 3 years of having one, says the unit is rated only at 9.5 amps, but they say the building can't handle air conditioners. You know, it's like, well, what if there was a fad to have, computers? I mean, that happened. Desktop computers, that happened. That uses a lot of power. That happened in the 90s. And if these buildings are old, well, it worked fine for them. Now we've got laptops, so we're not using as much power.
No, and over the years, of course, people have switched to things like LED lights, which use, 1/4 or 1/6 the power of traditional light bulbs. So just take out your normal old incandescent light bulbs, put in LED, and that would sort of substitute for whatever power, this extra power is gonna suck.
It's
and
just
as we
maddening.
said too, BC has very, very low electricity rates. It's a 98% hydropower. It's a really excellent electricity system and shouldn't matter too much. There are some landlords that pay the utilities. Sometimes your utilities are included in your rent. And so I wouldn't imagine it going up more than $5 or $10. I mean, it is real. It would raise the electricity prices. But
raise the rent then. But don't let them freaking die. That's ridiculous. And I think they're more worried about, it sounds like they're worried about damage to the buildings with water and the way people do it. But the guy that they talked to, one of the guys they talked to has one of those with the tube that you put in the window.
Yeah, that's more common. I mean, the units in the window can fall out and kill somebody. That's not great. But those ones are more efficient. We talked about that before on the show. It is more efficient to have the window unit because then the hot side is outside the building. But, I'm sure a portable unit is still a good idea if you don't want to die from heat stroke. Brought to you by ExxonMobil. Okay, so the European Union has passed 2 laws now in terms of the charging infrastructure on the highways. So the EU wants to accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, and so they're putting in rules or mandates for electric chargers along the highway. So they've identified key routes along the highways through Europe, and they have said in this new law that you must have chargers with at least 400 kilowatt output, which is quite high.
I like the idea, though.
It's the early ones. A lot of the ones around here are only 50 kilowatts. But
the brand new one I used in Wynyard was 50, like brand new. Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, brand new. That makes no sense. So 400 kilowatts and placed every 60 kilometers along these key routes by 2026. So they've got a couple of years to do that, to get up to these 400 kilowatt machines, which, probably don't exist that much. A lot of them are maybe 300 kilowatts or 350, but 400 kilowatts is going to probably require some new designs for the chargers, and then different rules for truck and bus charging. So that would be every 120 kilometers, and they want output of 1.4 to 2.8 megawatts for truck and bus charging. Those are bigger batteries. They need
We
more,
need to think ahead. We need to do this.
Yeah. It's all about thinking ahead. So there's also mandates for simpler charging payments. This is something we've mentioned a lot on the show, that often these chargers, aside from Tesla, are confusing and complicated to use. So under the new rules, customers must be able to pay with cards or contactless devices, and the prices must be displayed to the customer. So you need to be able to just tap with your card and not have an account or an app or something like that. And meanwhile, in the UK, they're doing some similar things. They want 99% uptime charging reliability in the UK. This has been the other problem, is that these stations are often not working. So 99% is the mandate in the UK. It's right now, it's as much as 15% of the EV chargers in the UK are not working right at this exact moment. So they want to decrease this to 8% and then eventually down to this 1%.
Here.
In the UK.
This is where the government needs to step in, because it's almost conspiratorial. It's just so ridiculous how these chargers aren't working. And some of them, one guy did a Winnipeg to Calgary trip and found that the Petro-Canada chargers were only outputting 40 kilowatts instead of the rated 100, for example. So they're working, but they're not working. And that's just like inexcusable. Yeah. Like, what do you do? I don't know. Brian, it's time to skip the mailbag this week because we don't have time. So we'll get to your letters next week. If you want to reach us, though, it's cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and I promise we will read all letters that come to the show that don't swear at me or threaten my life. So what's the last story this week?
Okay, this is from Electrek. This is a solar, salt, and shrimp farm. This is a 3-in-1 power station in China. And I know agrivoltaics is one of James's favorite topics.
I don't like shrimp, so you lost me at shrimp.
Yeah. This is the aqua version of that, aquaculture. Yeah. So they've figured out that they can put these solar panels on water and breed shrimp in the water, as well as harvest salt from the water with a 1 gigawatt worth of solar panels, which is an insane amount of solar panels. They're going to generate 1.5 billion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. This is enough to power 1.5 million households in China. These are bifacial panels, which is the latest craze in solar panels, and this is perfect for the water because you get excellent reflection off the water to the back of the panels, which makes them way more efficient. But this is, massive. And they've spaced the rows of panels kind of far apart to allow for these other things to happen, like the breeding the shrimp.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Buckle in. Persian Gulf International Airport in Iran reported a heat index of 152 Fahrenheit. That's
Is that possible?
66.7 Celsius today. That is not the normal way they do it, but there's tarmacs around and stuff like that. So it's not going to set the worldwide record, but those are intolerable for conditions of human life. And I've seen, in China and places like that where the ground temperature is 80 degrees Celsius. Like, if that's, you think about how hot it is for it to stand 1 meter above the ground like a human does. But the ground is even hotter, and the drought on plants is going to be just crazy.
Yeah, literally frying an egg on the sidewalk.
Yeah. Twitter was abuzz this week with rumors that movie theaters are not as cold as they used to be during summer heat waves. I don't know if you've seen that. We'll continue to look into this story, even if Brian has to go see a Christopher Nolan film. Why do you hate him so much? Why?
I don't. I'm looking forward to Oppenheimer, which is playing here locally on 70 millimeter IMAX film, and I can't wait.
I will get to it eventually because I have to wait. A new analysis from the University of Waterloo says that public pensions have lost billions of dollars on their fossil fuel investments. Why do you keep investing in fossil fuels then? Grader stations, that is grader, as in Grader, the things that smooth gravel roads and remove snow on highways. Grader stations throughout the Yukon in northern Canada are switching from diesel to quote-unquote bomb-proof solar. Yes, the solar panel installations are not like you see here. They are on concrete and very sturdy panel arrays along the ground. And
do they have a lot of problem with bombs there in the Yukon?
That would be bad. Ooh, it's a CS fast fact. There are now around 10 million residential PV systems installed in Europe and over 1.1 million residential batteries, up 64% year over year.
Wow, that's a lot. I wouldn't have guessed that many.
That's going to help the grid. Going to help a lot of things. The Rivian Adventure Network chargers are only rated to -20 or -4 Fahrenheit. says out of spec reviews. That's not good. Not
Yeah, that's unfortunate. They'd be some of them wouldn't be
if
in
you
very
want to
cold
adventure
places.
where there is white stuff, then you have to have chargers that work better than that.
Cocaine, is that what
Exactly,
you're talking
on the
about?
ski slope. Russia is shipping crude oil to China again via the Arctic Ocean, according to Bloomberg. While that might make for a shorter Arctic route appealing, there has been a long opposition to using the sea for merchant shipping. Organizations, including the UN Intergovernmental Body for Climate... What did I say? I've run out of steam. We've gone too long. I've gone past my due date for podcast presenting. Organizations, including UN's Intergovernmental Body for Climate Change, have said that doing so could have negative consequences for the region, including higher emissions and threats to marine ecosystems. From the London Free Press, that is the Canadian London, an actual newspaper, and the only newspaper that's covering this for some reason, according to Google. Of course, yeah, maybe they're not allowed to do newspapers anymore, are they? That's another story for another show.
It's a long story, but
in Canada. Yeah. The Cami Assembly in Ontario, Canada, that's the electric vehicle plant in Ingersoll, has closed for a month amid a battery shortage, idling its workforce, says the union representing its workers. So that is, the whole battery shortage at GM that we've been talking about, which is scary. GM says it's overcoming battery supply chain issues and expects a lot more EVs being built in the second half of this year and much, much better next year, Mary Bear says, when more battery factories are online. From Clean Technica, the number of EV charging points in the United States nearly doubled in 3 years. I wonder what it'll do in the next 3 years. I bet it'll more than double. BYD Battery News, that is the Chinese Build Your Dreams car company, has a $1 billion factory in India opening. Sodium-ion batteries, the new kind. That's just very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I would like to know more about that. Because, they said they were going to get those batteries online. And like I said, those companies, they do it. The Chinese companies are moving fast. Faster than we can seem to move here. Enemy of the planet Joe Manchin and friend of the show, not really, enemy of the show, pardon me, refuses to rule out a third-party presidential run where he will presumably take some Democratic votes away from Biden and thus ruin the world. Fossil fuel companies are no doubt lining up to donate. And finally this week, Brian, I usually like to end a show on an inspiring good news story that blows your socks off. This week, I'm doing the reverse because I'm angry.
Oh, no.
I'm angry at the horrific situation, and I want to make sure our listeners are fully awake. I'm pissed off. I'm pissed off that I have to close my windows on a summer day to protect me from dangerous air. I live in a small prairie town. I'm pissed off that I haven't seen the blue sky in weeks in July. I'm pissed off that I have to give the fossil fuel industry any of my vacation money. So here we go. This is via Heat Map News. Sit down. A 2-day citywide blackout in Phoenix during a heat wave could lead to half the population, some 789,000 people requiring emergency medical attention. So, the heat waves get worse. It's more likely that a blackout could happen, a long one.
Yes. And Phoenix is one of those cities where a lot of Canadians vacation there in the winter, a lot of elderly retired Canadians. So presumably there's a large population of senior citizens in Phoenix, and they would all be screwed if a heat wave caused a massive power outage.
And this is true for every city, but Phoenix skews old. According to new research published this spring, a 2-day citywide blackout in Phoenix would do that, and as many as 12,800 people could die. 13,000, that's more than 9 times Hurricane Katrina from a power outage and a heat wave, a very gentle little heat wave, and boop, the power goes out, and you've got 9 Katrinas on your hand. They can happen during a heat wave for all kinds of reasons, and strain on the grid is one of them. Everyone cranks up their air conditioners at the same time. By one estimate, 2/3 of North America is at risk of energy shortfalls this summer during periods of extreme heat. And these things are going on now all over the world, so we have listeners all over the world, so we wish you well. And blackouts, of course, can be citywide. The title of this article is How to Survive a Heat Wave. It is on heatmap.news. That is it for this week. That's all we got. You know how to contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week.
Record highs. For over 100 years, we didn't hit it. And then in 2020, we got 130. In 2021, we got 130. And then we might hit it again this weekend.
Decimating entire ecosystems if they die.
It's not only in Florida. Something like 40% of the planet is seeing a marine heat wave right now.
If it continues the trend now, I think we're all in for a big shock.
It shouldn't come as one. Globally, scientists have been sounding the alarm for decades.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction. All you can talk about is the money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth.
Economic growth may be of little comfort to those currently enduring China's heat wave right now. Record temperatures of over 50 degrees Celsius seen in Xinjiang. All this as the United Nations warned that Europe's heat wave is likely to continue into August, sparking yet more wildfire risks as extreme temperatures start to become the new normal. In the long run, we have to find ways to keep ourselves cool without further polluting the planet.
And immediately, we can't just wait for another 2 years. This has to be done, this year, next year.